I want to alert you to some good news. Some good news if you are, in fact, the kind of person who looks for good news.
Good news.
And that is that the state of recruiting in Texas is strong.
Let's go.
Once again, Texas led the way with the most prospects across the state of Texas.
Texas high school football is king.
We did it, guys. We
just keep doing it.
We just keep doing it. And when you take a look across the state of Texas, what I think is interesting is that it's not just the blue bloods that are putting out prospects. When you take a look across the state of Texas overall, there were a grand total of, I have this number here somewhere. Oh yeah, here it is. Actually, this is a good question for you, Pickle. And you don't know the answer to this because we don't pre-produce this show.
No.
How many Texas high school football programs signed a player to an FBS letter of intent in the class of 2024?
Oh, wow. Okay, so there's 1,500 schools.
1,500 schools. Signed at least one.
Around like 400 or
205.
205. Okay.
205 different schools signed one player to an FBS letter of intent. 205 different schools. Now, that is the second most ever. Last year there were 208 schools.
I guess you have to also put into consideration, and this is where I was thinking more about like number of recruits rather than schools,
so
because there are definitely schools that signed multiple ones. Right. So that's probably why I was a little bit on the high side, as I was thinking more number of recruits.
It's 332 prospects across 205 schools.
Okay, that's a little bit more on par with what I was thinking.
1.5.
Yeah, 350 to 400 was my guess of recruit numbers.
1.5 per school. And what is fascinating about that is that you take a look across the landscape, and it is big schools, small schools. Everyone is contributing here to the strength of prospects across the state of Texas. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to take a look at the schools and which Texas high school football teams put out the most number of prospects, FBS signees, in 2024. Now, one caveat before we get going, and maybe people don't know this. We do not include the 3 service academies in this: Army, Navy, and Air Force. Mm-hmm. Now, that is not because we don't love the troops. I think you know, watching this show,
we do love the troops.
We love the troops. We love the air troops.
The aqua troops.
We love the aqua troops.
And the land troops.
We love the land troops. But
there's technically some coastline troops in there too, but they don't have a school.
They do have a school.
Not football.
They might play like D3 football, Coast Guard.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. We'd look that up. Anyway, all that to say,
extra aqua troops.
If you are
additional aqua.
If you are, Happy Veterans Day. It's not Veterans Day. If you play football at Army, you do not sign a letter of intent.
Correct.
That is a different situation. You do not sign a national letter of intent. So we are not intentionally excluding them. We are only focusing on players that sign a national letter of intent.
Correct.
And so first things first, we're just going to look at which teams produced the most prospects. Which teams in the class 2024 produced the most. And in my view, the headline here is that you've got a lot of DFW blue bloods. Mm-hmm. Largely, rounding up, you're going to have a lot of DFW blue bloods. 2 teams signed 6 prospects. DeSoto, the 2-time defending 6A Division II state champs, signed 6, as well as McKinney. Yep. McKinney also signed 6 to FBS letters of intent. There were another 4 programs that signed 5 players to letters of intent, and I would say that all of these would fall under the category of blue blood as well. Mm-hmm. South Oak Cliff, coming off of last year's state record 11, signed 5 more. Aledo, Duncanville, and then our first non-DFW, Manville, signed 5 players to letters of intent. Then you have a glut of teams there at 4 teams, a large number of teams that signed them. Those teams were, he said to himself as he pulled up the graphic. Those teams were, will you please pull up? Thank you. Oh my gosh, it's not going. Pleasant Grove signed 4 of them, as well as Byron Nelson, Galena Park North Shore, again, blue blood, Katie Tompkins, Lancaster, Mansfield Summit, Melissa, who's Coach Matt Nally we're going to hear from in just a moment, North Crowley, South Lake Carroll, and Pleasant Grove. There were a grand total of 9 teams that signed 4 players to FBS letters of intent. And so if you want to stop right there and you would say, well, what are the hotbeds of Texas high school football recruiting? You could just say, oh, it's major metro areas, right?
Yes.
There are no programs basically outside of Pleasant Grove. Mm-hmm. Pleasant Grove is the outlier here as far as not being in a major metro area. Right. Everyone else is either DFW or Houston, basically, except for Pleasant Grove out there in Texarkana. Obviously an incredible job that Josh Gibson and company have done.
A little bit shocking to me that there wasn't an Austin program, like a Westlake or a Lake Travis, even a Vandergrift. Now they're kind of turning into a football farm.
And it's interesting to see because to make this list, you have to have all of your great players, not all of your great players, but many of your great players in one class.
Yep. That's
one thing that's interesting is that there are a number of programs out there that this will shift. There will be another program that we're not thinking of that was going to jump up into this next year. But I don't want to stop there because, look, you look at a program like Galena Park North Shore putting out 4 signees. That's really impressive, obviously.
But they also have a lot of players on the roster.
They have a ton of kids in the school.
Yeah.
They have 4,500 kids in the school.
Right.
All right? So what I wanted to do was I wanted to take a look at which programs put out the most prospects and the most signees per capita.
Correct.
Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to take the number of signees that they had in the class 2024 and compare it to their enrollment. Mm-hmm. Now, one small caveat here. Again, it's caveat season. When it comes to private schools, we do not have the enrollment for every private school. They're not required to give it to us. We have a lot of them, but we don't have all of them. Mm-hmm. So there is a chance, an off chance that there's one I think every private school that signed one, we have the enrollment, but just FYI. But let's take a look at which programs signed the most prospects per capita as far as their student enrollment is concerned. And maybe this will be surprising to you. The answer is Houston St. Thomas.
Wow.
Houston St. Thomas, the Eagles signed 2 players to national letters of intent. One of them was our private school cover boy, Johan Cardenas, who signed with Vanderbilt. Mm-hmm. And then Michael Anthony Okwura, who was featured on This Week in Recruiting.
Yep.
He signed with Cal. And so
that's a big get.
With those 2 signees against an enrollment of 177, that means 1 out of every 88.5 students signed a national letter of intent at St. Thomas. Kind of remarkable.
Yeah.
Then you look at Pleasant Grove, and we talked about them in the previous segment. Pleasant Grove signed 4 players to letters of intent. They have an enrollment of just 763. So 1 out of every 190 or so students signed a national letter of intent. Then you're going to get into kind of what makes up a lot of this, which is small schools that had 1 player.
Yep.
Okay? Beckville.
Math gets pretty easy here.
Jacoby Williams signs with Texas Tech. They got 193 students in their class, so he goes and obviously he helps their average. 1 out of every 193.
And he was worth the price of admission.
Same with Dallas Christian, 196 players or 196 students, 1 signee. Hitchcock, your beloved Bulldogs, signed 2 players to national letters of intent against an enrollment of 429, about 215. Refugio, of course, signed their outstanding running back.
Ernest Campbell.
Yes, Ernest Campbell went to Texas A&M. So he, with an enrollment of 215.5. Timpson, just a little bit bigger, 219. Terry Bussey, also signed with Texas A&M. And then Hawley. Hawley had 1 player signed to the national letter of intent with an enrollment of 223. So if you look pound for pound, you can make an argument that these programs were the recruiting hotbeds. What I think is the real headline here is that, and we've said this a lot, everywhere you look across the state of Texas, whether you're talking regionally, whether you're talking class-wise, there are players everywhere. And I think what this particular data set proves is that there are fewer and fewer hidden gems.
Right.
I've been of the belief for the past 10 years or so that the advent of the internet has killed the sleeper.
Yeah.
There's just not really those guys anymore. No. It used to be that, if you could go to this small town tucked away, hey, by the way, Timpson, this tiny town, Timpson's got this superstar quarterback that's actually going to be incredible.
Right.
I just don't think that happens anymore. Instead, those guys get noticed and they become 5 stars.
Right, which is funny because there's such an argument to be made as to, one, I could see how that's not as fun for people who really like getting in the weeds.
Yeah.
I'm going to go visit this small town, like recruiting guys on college campuses that are like, oh no, hang on, I've got the inside scoop. Makes it not as fun for them. That being said, it makes it so much better for the players. You can go to any school. If you are a FBS athlete, they will find you.
You'll get noticed.
I think it's better for the sport that
You'll
way.
get noticed. We'll talk about it tomorrow, but like, I think a perfect example of that is Grayson Rigdon at Benjamin. Grayson Rigdon plays 6-man football.
Right.
Now, he might be the greatest 6-man football player of all time, but he plays 6-man football at a tiny town. He just announced his commitment to Air Force.
Yep.
If you can play, you will get noticed, regardless of where you play.
And that's better for the sport.
I think that makes for a healthier sport overall. So there you go. There's Math Tuesday.
Math Tuesday.